Welcome into Boston Celtics Today right here on Chat Sports. I am your host, Jayson. I hope all of you had a fantastic weekend. And speaking of the weekend, right before it got started, Brad Stevens made another move and another trade during this offseason, which has been busy in his first one as general manager of this franchise. Boston receiving Juan Hernangomez from the Memphis Grizzlies. He played last year with the Minnesota Timberwolves in exchange for Kris Dunn, Carsen Edwards, and a 2026 second-round pick. Carsen Edwards, the most notable name in this trade, going elsewhere for Boston. We knew that Kris Dunn wasn't going to be a part of this franchise moving forward, but coming up on today's show, we're going to take a look at what Hernangomez can bring to the Celtics front court because he is a pretty decent shooter, and he does add depth at the front court spot. So Celtics are basically getting a affordable, young, floor-stretching big man. And when you examine this roster, that's really one of the needs that they had on this team going into the 2021-2022 season. So Hernangomez is going to be able to fulfill that role. He was traded to Memphis along with Jarrett Culver in that Patrick Beverley trade back a couple weeks ago. And there was a rift between Hernangomez and the Minnesota Timberwolves because last year during Olympic qualifying, Hernangomez had gotten hurt. Then going into the Olympics in Tokyo this summer, Minnesota didn't want him to partake in the Olympic Games playing for Spain. That caused a rift, and that relationship didn't last long after he had signed a 3-year deal with Minnesota back a couple off seasons ago. What is Boston getting in Juancho, as he's otherwise known as? Well, he's going to be under contract, unrestricted free agent, in 2023. He signed a 3-year, $21 million deal with Minnesota a couple off seasons ago. Came into the league out of Spain with a little bit of pedigree. 15th overall pick back in 2016, but has not lived up to those expectations. Was drafted originally by the Denver Nuggets, had some good spots there, goes to Minnesota, also had some spurts of solid play there, but hasn't been able to string together any type of consistency. But for Boston, they're hoping that they're getting kind of a player at an affordable price who is going to end up being a bargain because he's going to be 26 at the end of this month and does have some modern-day value as a floor-stretching big man. Last year with the Timberwolves, 7.2 points per game, little less than 4 rebounds. He shot around 43.5% from the floor, but less than 33% from distance. And here's the problem that I have with Hernangomez. You expect him to be a knockdown floor-stretching big, but when you look at his numbers throughout his NBA career, he hasn't really been that to a consistent level because he hasn't been able to knock down three-pointers at a consistent rate. You look at his career numbers here. They don't do anything that really impresses you much for a guy who was drafted in the middle of the first round several years ago. Less than 6 points per, 3.5 rebounds, field goal percentage hovering around 43, and his career three-point numbers, 35%. Not good at all, but if you put him on a roster next to Jayson Tatum as well as Jalen Brown, is he going to get more looks and more open opportunities from beyond the arc to maybe connect at a higher clip from those long-range shots? We will see. Certainly, I like the thought process of bringing in a guy who's affordable, $7+ million, contract non-guaranteed in 2 seasons, but also you're hoping for some high upside on this price tag. You're just hoping that development happens and something clicks for him because he's only in his mid-20s. Celtics fans, sound off, speak up. What do you think of this deal as we break it down on today's show? Do you like the trade? Type Y for yes, type N for no. Let your feelings be known and get those votes in the comment section down below. We are getting closer and closer to 10,000 subscribers here on Celtics Today. This is one of the fastest growing channels here at Chat Sports. A big reason for that, any move that happens with your Celtics, we cover it here. And we cover latest Celtics news, rumors, live Q&As on our NBA show. So hit that red subscribe button down below or go to youtube.com/CelticsTV. The Athletic did break down this Hernangomez trade. This is what they had to say, and I thought it was some interesting insight as to the player he has been and maybe the player that he could become and the flashes of the player that we've seen. After Denver traded him to Minnesota in February of 2020, Hernangomez averaged 12.9 points per game and 7.3 rebounds per game down the stretch of the 2019-20 season. Pretty solid numbers. Over 14 games, he showed off his potential as a stretch power forward, shooting 42% from the three-point arc, on about 5 attempts per game. That type of production would be a great fit for the Celtics, who have several unreliable shooters in their backcourt and will need to spread the court somehow around Jayson, Tatum, and Jalen Brown. This is the roster that Hernangomez is going to join alongside. You look at the projected starting lineup, I think this is what Ime Udoka is going to go with, but it can be interchangeable. Do you put Dennis Schroeder in this starting lineup? You could do that. There is some positional and lineup versatility at Udoka's disposal. But right now, let's go with Marcus Smart, Josh Richardson, Jayson Tatum, Jalen Brown, and Al Horford as the starters. And then the bench unit with this addition of Hernangomez has become somewhat solid. You have Dennis Schroeder, Peyton Pritchard coming off a very solid summer league stint, Aaron Nesmith, Grant Williams, Robert Williams III coming off that contract extension. Where does Hernangomez factor into the equation? Well, when you look and you kind of break down the front court situation in Boston, they don't really have a player outside of Al Horford who can be a reliable big man who can connect on shots from beyond the arc. And maybe that's what Hernangomez is going to be able to bring to the table. Grant Williams, not necessarily that guy because he's been very inconsistent. So Hernangomez is going to be on this roster. Who's not going to be on this roster? It's a guy who is included in this trade in Carsen Edwards, who Boston fans were expecting big things from after he was drafted in the second round in 2019, originally by the Philadelphia 76ers. There was a lot of hype around Edwards going into the draft when he got drafted by the Sixers, then dealt to Boston because he had a great, and I mean great, NCAA tournament run with Purdue, but that never really translated to the NBA level, and according to The Athletic, Boston kind of lost faith in Edwards over time. He had some summer league flashes, but that was really about it, because in 2 seasons in Boston, he spent some time in the G League, didn't really get any consistent run at the NBA level, and his numbers weren't all that great. You were expecting Edwards to really be a threat to shoot the basketball as soon as he crossed half court because that's what he was doing with Purdue, but that never really translated to the NBA level. Only 9 minutes per game in his 2 seasons in Boston, 3.5 points per game. And when you draft a guard the caliber of Carsen Edwards, who's been able to show the propensity of putting the biscuit in the basket, he wasn't able to do that. 37% from the field, not good enough. 30% from distance, not good enough either. I like Carsen Edwards coming out of Purdue, but when he hit the NBA floor, he looked a little small. The shooting numbers, they weren't reliable, they weren't consistent, and if he wasn't able to get minutes on a Celtics roster that really could have used a shooting secondary playmaker like Carsen Edwards, tells you everything that you need to know. So will you miss Carsen Edwards, Celtics fans? Let me know in the comment section. Type 1 for yes, type 2 for no. I thought there was more upside here. Didn't come to fruition. Is it going to come to fruition in Memphis? We will see. If he plays well in this trade, then maybe, that is reversed. Type 1 for yes or type 2 for no.